From Thursday morning of this week, masks will now need to be worn on all public transport in Auckland, in and out of Auckland, and on domestic passenger flights throughout the country.
Hello and welcome to Business New Zealand Policy Roundtable for Monday, the 16th of November. I'm Grant Walker. Export New Zealand Executive Director Catherine Beard has welcomed the signing of the RCEP trade deal. Now that formalises New Zealand's trading terms with 14 Asia-Pacific countries. The government expects the deal will eventually boost GDP in total by $2 billion, largely by cutting red tape, making access easier and paving the way for electronic commerce and government procurement. Ms. Beard says having nearly a third of the world signed up to better trading rules is a great achievement. The deal is set to make exporting within the RCEP bloc easier, faster and more profitable. The tariff and non-tariff burden on New Zealand exporters have also been reduced. Ms. Beard says also significant are new rules around the treatment of perishable foods. RCEP countries have agreed that their customs services will release perishable goods within 6 hours of arrival. She says this is a vital issue for our food exporters who will be better able to manage and protect the quality of their products. RCEP also improves prospects for exporters of services with greater access into the significant markets of Indonesia, Thailand and the Philippines for export education. Meanwhile, authorities from the Chinese city of Jinan say they've found traces of COVID-19 on beef, tripe and packaging from New Zealand and a handful of other countries. However, our Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern says she's been advised it was not a product from New Zealand and officials were investigating further. Chinese officials say the products and packaging that have been found to have had COVID-19 have come from New Zealand, Brazil and Bolivia, while 2 other provincial capitals detected it on packaging on pork from Argentina. Ms. Ardern told TVNZ today she's being advised it is not New Zealand beef. Joining me now, Business New Zealand CEO Kirk. Kirk, I want to start with the PSI index out today. Slight upward movement, but were we expecting more?
Well, probably not. I mean, I guess the people in the services sectors would have been expecting more. I mean, that's probably an area which has been under a lot of strain. If you think about some of the challenges with the Auckland alert levels, business still getting back to operating fully, and then kind of some of the challenges last week with the potential for those alert levels to move again, and the Auckland CBD being closed on Friday. So it's not a surprise. I would expect that people in those sectors, if we don't move through alert levels, they would expect to see an uptick in activity and potentially certainly coming into holiday season.
Services employment, though, still in contraction. That's probably expected, though, isn't it?
Yeah, well, if you think about that's where probably the biggest job losses have been, and as you say, if the activity index is declining or it's not as strong as you think it should be, then of course employment's going to be weak in that area.
Let's talk about employment. The COVID-19 wage subsidy has ended. Now what?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think there's been a lot of conjecture about the impact of the wage subsidy ending, but you've got to remember that there's been still a lot of money spent in the New Zealand economy, not only by the government but by New Zealanders. Some, varying figures between $8 and $10 million by New Zealanders spending money in New Zealand, not on overseas travel and in overseas jurisdictions or overseas holidays. So I do think you've got that. You've got a $35 billion stimulus package and income support wage subsidy relief. That's still money flowing through the economy. Got another $1.5 billion with the small business cash flow loan scheme. Again, that's money that is moving around the economy, and you've got the Reserve Bank standing in the background with plenty of cash ready to continue to support the economy in need.
Yeah, no, that's interesting,
and the government,
because they are going to be lending to banks at very low interest rates, and the expectation that the banks will lend to businesses. Will they, though?
Good question. You hope so, but of course you've got to also understand that the banks will have their own obligations. So depending on where they're lending into, if they're lending into households, for example, they've got responsible lending obligations to those households. So they'll have to be, it'll be a fine balancing act, I think, for banks. And I wouldn't want to see them get criticised if they're not pushing money out the door. I think they have to be careful in these times that they they appropriately support customers.
But it's interesting because three banks already have brought in their own LVR restrictions months ahead of what the Reserve Bank were going to do.
Well, I think because they're mindful of the risks on households at the moment, and they'll be waiting to see what happens, after the wage subsidy comes off. What happens when, what happens with the holiday season, whether, some of the businesses that are in the services sector that we talked about before can grow and people are spending money over that period. So I think they will be waiting to see certainly what happens, and they've probably decided that they want to take a measured approach. I mean, particularly if you think about it in the context of the various housing markets.
All right, masks on all public transport, taxis, Ubers, etc. are back mandatory in Auckland and all flights, masks from Thursday. That's pretty much expected, I would presume, and probably a good idea.
Probably pretty sensible, really. I mean, I guess with all of these things, what we're trying to do, what we want to see, I think, is not a move upwards in alert levels, and anything that people can do to help protect themselves mitigates the risk of moving back up through the alert levels. Same with the QR codes, for example. All businesses around the country still displaying those QR codes. I think people need to use them more.
But they're not, though. I mean, I went to quite a few shops at the weekend, and I stopped to sign in because I'm a goody-good, but I think it's the right thing to do. And all these people just walked past me, straight in, didn't even look at it.
Yeah, I think it's something that we need to keep revisiting and reminding people about, and about not being complacent, because the purpose of those QR codes is to help prevent a move back through the alert levels. It's about information that health has about people and who they've been in contact with. The better information they have, the quicker that they can get to potential contacts, and the quicker they can shut down a cluster.
Because that's the problem. We seem to be sort of reactive instead of proactive, and the numbers only go up after we have community cases. We need to do this beforehand.
Yeah, I think if you look at what else is happening, the Ministry of Health are looking at something around mobile and Bluetooth technologies, something to do with phone devices as well. So the more information that they have about where a person's been and who they've been in contact with if they have COVID, the better it is for the rest of the community. So we don't have to shut things down and go into lockdowns. And I think you're really seeing the consequences of having to go into widespread, large-scale lockdowns in Europe and the UK and parts of the US. It's really it has a massive impact on their economies.
What do you remember saying to you finally as we're only weeks away from Christmas, because the QR codes, we're hoping that people are going in and buying stuff, which is going to help everybody here. But what do you remember feeling about Christmas?
Well, I think there's a real there was certainly nervousness last Friday when we were thinking about a move back up through the alert levels in Auckland. I think businesses are quite vigilant about what's going on, because an increase in alert levels in Auckland affects the rest of the country as well. People generally stop travelling. Those restrictions impact the rest of the country. So I think they want to get through Christmas hopefully without a move through the alert levels and see people moving around the country relatively freely, even if it means that you have to wear a mask to do so, so that business can continue to happen and happen safely.
And let's just hope people spend local.
Yeah. And even, I guess they don't have any options if they're stuck in New Zealand. So that is local.
Well, that's fair enough. I'll catch you in a couple of weeks.
Thanks.